Good afternoon, everyone. It is now 4 o'clock. We'll start shortly. I just want to make sure that everyone that's in the waiting room is admitted so far. Okay, this meeting is being recorded, so for those of you who have colleagues, fellow teachers, or for those supervisors that may be on the webinar and your teacher can't attend, this meeting will be recorded and posted on the Quest for Success LDOE website. Our objectives, similar to the last meeting, we're going to have our introductions. We're going to talk about the hybrid / virtual guidance, the original activities, the alternate activities, and then we're going to close out. Once again, for those of you who may not know me, my name is Ted Holmes, and I am the course manager for Quest for Success. So I oversee all things related to Quest, to include selecting training sites, performing training along with the trainers, ensuring that the curriculum is updated. I'm the person that issues all certificates, and if you have any questions, then normally I'm the person that you would send those questions to. My information will be shared after this webinar, but it also can be found on the Louisiana Believes website on the Quest for Success course page. Spencer, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everybody. So my name is Spencer Kuiper, and I was one of the original co-authors of the Quest for Success curricula. And today I'm just going to share with you a couple of updates that we've made to make the curriculum a bit more remote friendly.
Thanks, Spencer. So like the only activities that have really been modified are those that that we looked at and we thought were challenging to complete in a like in an online environment. So there are some activities, for instance, like making a vision board. Although although teachers may be 100% virtual, there are ways that teachers can easily adapt that, whether it's using PowerPoint or some other software in order to accomplish that. So those activities may have not been modified. The ones that were modified were those that had a lot of detail. For instance, the obstacle course, as we discussed during our last webinar, the tower, as well as the food truck, which are two that we will discuss during this webinar. So as I stated earlier, the original activities for this unit that we adjusted were the food truck activity. These alternate activities are an option for hybrid and virtual instruction. Of course, if you have students that are going to school and you can do this safely in a face-to-face environment or in this hybrid environment, by all means, feel free to continue to use the original activity. However, if you have students who are 100% virtual or for some reason it's unsafe to conduct this activity, then that's when we refer you to use the hybrid activity in order to make sure that students get the same learning objectives out of this unit, but that they also are able to work in a safe environment. In this activity, our students work together in small groups to build a physical prototype. Some of you may have attended training and had some of your trainers bring out the examples from their classrooms, or they may have even showed you videos of students like participating in this activity. This activity is one of the highlights from what I hear from the field in this course. So students really love this food truck activity. As you can see from the highlighted area, it talks about some of the original things that were used in this unit, whether it was the physical model of the food truck using shoe boxes or some other material. Like I'll just share that some teachers in the past held community nights where they brought families in and students actually made food. And so we know that we can't do that during this activity. But you remember, like, this course was designed for you to also be able to have some creativity. So think about that as we still navigate this environment. How can you still be creative and still accomplish what needs to be accomplished? The next activity that we redesigned is the tower activity. This activity is probably familiar to all Quest for Success teachers. If you attended the training, this was one of the activities that they had you to do during the training, where they separated you into teams and the trainers gave you cups, balloons, popsicle sticks, and asked you to build a tower. Uh, they, they purposely didn't give you a lot of directions because it was for you to learn about the engineering design process as well as team building. And lastly, in this unit is a catapult activity. Similar to other activities in this unit, this activity focuses on problem solving skills, creativity, as well as the engineering design process. In this activity, students work together in teams to build a working catapult. So as you can see, most of these activities are really hands-on, face-to-face, and so that's why we felt the need to redesign them, because having an understanding of the engineering design process is really crucial in this course, especially towards the early part of the course. It's going to set the tone for the rest of this unit in this course. Now we're going to talk a little bit about the Quest hybrid resources and the changes that were made. As I shared in our previous webinar, we created this LDOE crosswalk, and this can be found on the Quest for Success LDOE webpage. It's going to be down in the administration tools area on the website. And so as we continue to update this document, you'll start to see hyperlinks get filled in. So this is the one from our last webinar, but on the one that's currently on the page, the links for the alternate activities for Unit 3 are all filled in. And so you'll be able to click on those links and get to these alternative activities. Now we get into our alternative activities. Just to kind of reiterate what we discussed in the last webinar as far as the design of the materials. So if you look at the modified teacher resource guide, there's been the section modifications has been added to this resource. And so the modification is going to show what has been modified and changed. It's going to give some insights about using it in the LMS, as well as the different modifications that will allow you to be successful in presenting this in a 100% virtual environment or some type of blended environment. On the tower, we changed that, alternate that to the paper towel, to the paper tower challenge. And so like it's gonna walk through the steps of that activity. So each activity is gonna contain time frame, materials, and tips on being able to present this activity in a synchronous as well as asynchronous instruction, meaning either like you're going to be either face-to-face in person, or you're going to be on Zoom or some other learning platform or something that helps you be able to communicate with your students face-to-face, as well as asynchronous if the students may be doing this offline or not in a face-to-face environment. So every activity is going to have these tips as well as the remote learning tips. Similar, our Catapult activity is going to have a real similar setup. It's going to tell you about offering it in the different modalities. So one thing that I did point out here is because we're introducing a new website. Please consult with your school IT department to ensure that any needed web addresses are accessible. I haven't posted the new whitelist yet. That is the list. They have all the URLs, but that will be posted this week. I've already copied down the links from Unit 2 as well as Unit 3. So I'm going to be posting that to the website. And it's going to have every URL, every web address that you're going to need to have open in order to successfully offer this in this blended environment. Our next activity is back to the food truck, and this walks you through the same thing. It's going to show you all the remote learning tips that Spencer created, as well as kind of walk you through using some new things such as SketchUp. For those of you that may not be familiar with it, it is an online website that allows students to be able to construct 3D models. So for instance, like the food truck activity, your students may be great at using this to construct the food truck in the 3D model virtually versus doing it hands-on, or you have some type of other software, that you may prefer, something that you may be familiar with, but this is just an example that gives you something to work with for your students. Uh, it's highlighted on this slide that instructors should be familiar with any resource that the students are using. Uh, so this means that if you're going to use this, that you need to take the time in order to familiarize yourself with the software or with the website, whatever you're going to be using, so that when it's time to present this, that you can show the students exactly how to use it without having to go back and stop and get behind on pacing because you have to figure out how to use it yourself. So now we're gonna go into the actual the activities or the links, the guides that were created. I'm gonna turn this portion of it over to webinar over to Spencer, and he can walk us through these materials that were created, and then he's gonna walk us through using some of the more complicated online activities that were also created. Spencer, please feel free to let me know what to click and how you want to navigate this.
I appreciate it. Can you transition host capability over to me by
Yes.
chance? Cool, awesome. And I should be able to just toss those guides up here. Well, hello everyone and good afternoon. My name is Spencer Kuiper. I'm an instructional technologist here in Caddo Parish, but before that, I taught Journey to Careers for years. Many of the activities in this unit actually came from my classroom when I was a teacher for Journey to Careers. And it's one of those units that kids always look forward to because, I mean, they're creating solutions to problems either in everyday life or some really cool scenario like the food truck unit. I'm going to go ahead and toss this up for all of you. So with the intent of keeping the integrity of the unit as close as possible, can you guys, Ted, is that good on your end?
Yes.
Can you see that?
Yes, I can.
Awesome. Fantastic. So keeping with the integrity of the unit, there have been some modifications to the unit that are going to ensure that students are still creatively solving problems, but at the same time meeting the dispositions and the skills that we're wanting them to acquire. And what are those in Unit 3? Well, not only just solving problems creatively, but also remembering and keeping track of the methodologies that they use to solve problems. Now, with the restrictions of the remote learning setting, it is difficult to maintain that group type environment, but we were very intentional with keeping that as much as possible. And we'll get into that a little bit more here in just a second. Ted already pointed you to the first place that all of you need to go to. That crosswalk document is going to be the vehicle that you access all of these documents through, okay? So step one, make sure that you can access that crosswalk document because that's where all of this new documentation is going to be housed, okay? Alrighty, and that's going to be on the State Department website. If you just search Quest for Success, you'll find that. I'm sure many of you have already accessed a lot of that information. So the second thing that we're going to go through pretty quickly is just the big major highlights of how this unit has been shifted. And that's kind of how I'm going to refer to things. A lot of things have not been changed, they've just been shifted. And a couple of things have actually been brought to the surface to make it a little bit more cohesive from lesson to lesson within the unit. You can read right there how each lesson has been majorly modified. So lesson 1, lesson 3, and lesson 4 are going to be the big units that the big lessons that we have modified in this unit. Lesson 1 and lesson 3 are kind of more one-off lessons, while lesson 4 is the food truck unit. And that is the big project-based learning opportunity that students go through within this unit. Okay, so heading into the very first portion, the first thing that we're going to have students go through is, of course, our tower building challenge, how that's been modified. is very simply allowing students to complete this with a paper challenge. And so with coming up with the materials on their own at home, all students are likely going to have paper. So this is a material that is easily accessible to students both within the school setting and at home. And students will be able to use that material, pretty accessibly. Now, in terms of the virtual component of this, both this lesson, so lesson one and lesson three have a new digital component. And that digital component is going to be right here, and that's going to be the digital design journal and the engineering design template that we have provided to you guys in PowerPoint form. So here are a couple of, I included this website for all of you just to kind of give you guys some examples of what good engineering journals look like and what not so good engineering design journals might look like. And a couple of these, you may want to include a couple of these in your LMS, Google Classroom, or just put them in as examples for students to view. If you're Zooming with kids or if you're Google Meeting with kids, showing them what good examples and not so good examples might look like. The reason I chose this website is that you can see some really rock star examples of what engineering design journals look like in different contexts in different classrooms. And these are, of course, on grade level with about the 8th grade level or 9th grade level. Okay, and so a couple of virtual tools have been added to this lesson. As you go through it, you'll see that if you're posting this for students to use synchronously, then they do have a virtual tower builder that they can go through, which is going to push them to a website. As that loads, probably might take a little while, but this is kind of challenging. If teachers, as you go through this, you may have a bit of trouble doing it. Kids are probably going to have an easier time than the teachers will, but it is to put students in the seat of creative problem solving. And so the task is they will have 3 minutes to design a way to get to the center bubble of the screen. And as their simulation, as they go throughout the simulation, their bridge or their tower will begin to collapse if it's unstable. And so they'll go through many, many iterations of that project or that activity until they are successful. And of course, the task when we push them to the piece of the engineering design notebook that I'll show you here in a second, the task is to either screenshot or draw a replication of what that tower piece is going to look like. And so we're just about here right now. And so Ted, you were telling me about this and you tried it and didn't find much success in doing that. So that's kind of fun. The kids will realize very quickly that the secret to a great tower is having a strong foundation. And so as they go throughout this activity, they'll start to experiment. You'll notice that there's a timer up at the top. And it'll seem pretty easy at first until pieces of the tower begin to collapse. And so they'll kind of get frustrated. They'll start realizing that, like, okay, well, I need a bigger base. This isn't working. What pieces of this are working and what pieces aren't working, and what changes do I need to kind of pivot and make? So the task is, of course, to build a tower all the way up to the center piece of the bubble right here within the time that they have on this timer. Okay, and so it's sort of a simulation that just presents them with a simple challenge. It's building a tower to get to this center bubble right here, but it's a lot harder than it seems. And so kids will be asked within the lesson to keep track of their progress and what building concept here finally kind of worked. They can clear their time or clear their tower, but the time will continue to pass. So it's about 3 minutes. It's a time challenge, so it automatically times the kids. Alrighty. If you're doing this live or synchronously with kids, you can do the paper challenge. So if kids have 20 sheets of paper, they can go through that themselves. But the big key here is having students record their thinking and record their progress in a digital engineering journal. Now, that has been included for you for use in PowerPoint, but I am going to go and find this really quickly. Here we go. Let me see if I can make this a little bigger for you to see. So this is a real quick, and you can modify this for whatever use you would like, but essentially this is an interactive notebook at the core. And so the concept here is for students to utilize this engineering design journal in all three of the modified activities. And so for the paper tower challenge, for the modified catapult, and for the food truck, students will utilize a copy of this engineering design journal for each of those lesson activities. So if I were a teacher and I were posting this to Google Classroom, as I get to each one of these modified lessons, I would add a blank copy of this engineering design journal for each one of those modified lesson activities. Not the same journal. They won't use like different pages. Like they're not going to use some of the pages for one lesson, then some pages for the other. They're using an entirely blank, brand new journal for each lesson 1, lesson 2, lesson 3. Okay. I'm going to leave that up for just a second. Then I'm going to head back to, there we go. Okay. There we go. So looking through the different sections of the lesson, you'll see here that there will be certain points that call out, for example, ask, imagine, plan, create, improve. Those are steps that you're going to find in that engineering design journal. And so as you go throughout the process and as you lead students through that, students will complete sections of the digital engineering design journal as they go through that learning activity. Now, going a little deeper into this, and again, so if we start heading into lesson 3, which is essentially designing a catapult activity, then the students will need an additional copy of the digital engineering design journal for their use. Now, this one was a bit more difficult because when we're talking about designing a catapult and testing it in the physical setting, like in the normal traditional classroom setting, you have access to all the materials that a teacher would provide. So that's going to be very limited, and we want to make sure that this activity is accessible to all students. So what we've included is we've included a PhET simulation, and if any of you have ever taught science, you probably have pulled from PhET before. That's a education initiative. Let me go back for a second, make sure that I don't lose my place. PhET is one of those things that a ton of teachers utilize, and that's PHET, phet.colorado.edu. Chances are your school system probably has this unblocked, but as Ted mentioned, you do want to make sure that you test that pretty early on, and that it's one of those things that's unblocked by your school's network. So what we've done here is we've now added the concept of partnering students in groups of 2 in terms of like feedback partners. Now you can't do that if it's asynchronous, but if you are teaching this synchronously, so if you're teaching it via Zoom or Google Meet, or if the kids are face-to-face, you can group the kids into partners for feedback partners as they go throughout the designing of the catapult. Now, again, the engineering design journal is still in use here. Instead of focusing on designing a physical catapult, students are going to focus on designing a conceptual catapult that solves an everyday problem. And now, just to give some examples here, you've got kids could come up with a way to launch dirty clothes into a dirty clothes hamper, a water or soda bottle launcher that encourages recycling, or a t-shirt launcher that is used at school pep rallies. Those are a couple of the examples that I came up with just to kind of get the kids thinking about like how could catapults be used in everyday life. So as the kids go forward through the lesson, they're going to be given access to the website for the PhET simulation via their LMS. So make sure to push that out through Google Classroom or whatever LMS that you're using, Canvas, what have you. And then the same sections of the engineering design notebook are going to be utilized. So you've got the ask, you've got the imagine phase going on, the plan. And the key here is to kind of focus on projectile motion. So as you go into the PhET simulation, and unfortunately, there's no direct way to link this for kids. That's the only downside of this. There's one link that you can provide, but unless you want to assign the first couple of pieces of this, you do want to instruct kids to go straight to just the lab portion. And again, there's no easy way to link that directly. You're just going to have to instruct the kids to go straight to the lab portion to kind of skip the intro part. So you do have your catapult model right here. And as you can see, you can change the trajectory of the launching mechanism. Over here, you've got the various different types of things that they could launch. It's fall season, so we'll go pumpkin chunkin here. And so we've got our pumpkin here. The goal for them is to understand how changing the mass of the item here along with the trajectory is going to directly impact the ability to reach your target. So as they go throughout the simulation, you'll notice here, they'll be able to kind of chart the progress and the trajectory angle of their launching mechanism right here. And then, of course, you've got prompts that are located within the lesson to kind of guide student understanding and thinking throughout this process. Through the research phase, you'll also have students, I've provided a website here. I always do that. That's very kid friendly, that just goes through the various different types of catapults and what they're used for. That students can be able to go in and kind of investigate to see what type of catapult would be best for their use, depending on the problem that they identify. And then from there, they'll go through the rest of the engineering design process identified within their engineering design notebook to complete the process. So the big thing here, that the big shift that happened was you now are shifting away from building a physical catapult, which is really unfortunate because that is one of the things that in the Quest for Success curricula is a really kind of high point for the kids. They really enjoy that. But due to the circumstances that we're in, this is kind of the next best thing in terms of just allowing the kids to experiment with this type of concept and problem solving. So what we're doing is we're focusing a little less on the creating of an actual prototype and creating a design of a prototype that they would develop. And again, we're testing projectile motion here and how mass and launch angle affect their designs, which is kind of the key takeaway here. So the two key pieces of like formative assessment items that we would kind of expect students to produce here is just capturing the general completion of the activity, as well as all of the written research and information that goes inside of that digital engineering design journal. That's the big thing that we kind of want students to kind of walk away from with this activity, is the ability to plan out that research and conduct that investigation themselves. Excuse me. All right. Which leaves us to our third big shift in this unit, and that's the food truck. Now, the food truck, for many of you who are new to Quest for Success, the food truck is near and dear to my heart, just because this was one of the coolest things that I taught in Journey to Careers. And for many of you who are not new to Quest for Success, you know that this is definitely one of the high points of the curricula. And so in maintaining the integrity of the project and the intent of the project, we do have a couple of opportunities here that are very similar to their traditional unmodified counterparts. But the big shift here is providing the same type of experience for kids, except now instead of a group activity, which in its unmodified form, that is the focus of the food truck unit, is leveraging that collective group energy to build this really awesome product. Instead of that piece, this is now built to be an independent project. So the food truck is like a project-based learning opportunity at the core, which means that there are a lot of different moving pieces that students are going to have to sort of meet and achieve along the way. It's several days in length. And so what we've done is we've built out some additional language here that will help students guide through this project-based learning opportunity independently, as opposed to collectively in a group, like I said. Now, with the guidance that we have provided, let me show you that right now. Here's the student performance task guide, the modified one. This is going to look very similar to the unmodified version at first, with the exception of the fact that all of the graphic organizers and all of the items that the students will be provided have now been retooled to be more independent driven. Okay, so when we go through the teacher guidance here, you'll notice that the first step is going to, of course, be pretty much the same as the unmodified version. The students will go through the history of what food trucks are. A digital virtual exit ticket has been, some guidance on that has been provided here. And the virtual exit ticket, if you're using Google Classroom or some LMS, you can build that into like a slide deck, or you can just add that as a question in many of the LMSs as a discussion, or just a blank question in Google Classroom. Day 2, as we go forward, you'll notice here that the kids are still utilizing a copy of that engineering design notebook, that interactive digital engineering design notebook that we spoke about earlier. So again, all 3 of these modified units, or lessons, include that digital engineering design notebook that I mentioned earlier. At different checkpoints, you'll have students go in and record their ideas and reflections into that digital journal. Much of this guidance is going to be the same, with the exception of a few items here, one of which being the business plan and the project schedule. Now, the project schedule is going to be something that you do want to assist students with. Right here, again, this has been modified to allow students to complete independently. But as a teacher, you may want to go in and frequently check in with students in terms of where they are with their project steps. I was a STEM teacher by trade for about 10 years, and project schedules in middle school or early high school kids, that time management piece is going to be the piece that you are going to need to assist with. So Very early on, students will complete that project schedule. And as a facilitator of this PBL, you are going to want to kind of check in with each student, especially your virtual students, and just kind of send a question out there or put a line of communication out there and say, hey, make sure that you kind of report back and tell me where you are in terms of your action steps. Are you on track with where you need to be? If not, what do we need to do? As we go forward, you'll notice, and in this unit, I kind of wanted to bring to the surface a little bit more of the language that makes this clear what sections of the interactive digital engineering design notebook that the students need to be um, reflecting in. That was not in the original unmodified version of this guidance. So there was a bit of like ambiguity in terms of like where some of this content should be living and where students should be putting it. So I went ahead and bolded that information here just to make that a little bit more clear, both for you and for the students involved. Students will then go through and create their menus, and guidance has been provided here in day, let's see, here we are, around day 5, day 6, where students can provide to you a day, a gallery walk, a virtual gallery walk. And this is where students will begin to start sharing some of their products with others within the class, either virtually or synchronously with students on like a Zoom call. And so this will take a bit of organization and a bit of planning on the teacher end if you choose to do the virtual gallery walk. But the goal here is for other students to provide feedback to either remote, virtual, or students on another day. So if you're on a modified schedule like an AB day or something like that, it's an opportunity for all of your students to see products from other students and then provide feedback based on what they have produced thus far. And that's a big key component here because this is one of those formative assessment measures that you don't want to skip out on because that's definitely going to help students provide quality products by the time they get down to their final presentation. Now we start getting into a bit of the creating stage of this project. And as we go forward into the creation of that, we have some links that were previously provided to students available here within the guidance as well. So a few notes right here. If you're providing this lesson synchronously, then you can go through the slide deck with the students. But if you're not and you are presenting this asynchronously, we have provided you with a quick guide on how to do a PowerPoint voiceover. And what that means is many of you guys have done Screencastify's in Loom. If those are products, if those resonate with you and those make sense, use those. But for those of you who have maybe never done a voiceover before, this guide gives you a really helpful step-by-step pictorial instruction guide on how to do a voiceover for a PowerPoint. And that can be something that you create for students and provide to them to go over the inside of a food truck PowerPoint slides that we do want to go over with students. Some reflection questions there for you to post for students as they go throughout the plan stage of their engineering design notebook. That RFP, and so day 7 is their request for proposal or an RFP, and that's going to simply leading students through an RFP process, what an RFP is and why that's important. And that essentially will allow students or lead students through just a general brainstorming session of what components their food truck should have. Now, as we get into the formal create stage, I recommended SketchUp for schools here, and along with a video that is targeted to help teachers understand what SketchUp for schools is. But many of you, and I recognize many of your names on the call today, many of you have experience in various CAD softwares, and even have those provided for your schools and some of the programs that they're involved with. If you have an idea of what a better way to present that to students, essentially what you want to do is allow students the opportunity to either design their food truck physically at home with whatever materials they have. They can use a shoebox, they can use whatever they have available at home. Or if they would like a digital tool, one of the things that we can promote is SketchUp for schools. Another one that comes to mind is Tinkercad. Many of your kids, depending on their electives or their involvement in some STEM stuff at school, might also have experience with Tinkercad. And that's another fantastic resource that's really easy to use, that students can kind of jump into with zero degree entry. Now, as we start getting, so they'll design their food truck there, their physical model of the food truck, check in, make sure that they're on point with where they need to be in terms of their project schedules, their business plan. And as we start getting into their business plan, they're going to use the Say Something protocol. And for those of you who are not new to teaching Quest for Success, this is something that existed in the unmodified version of this activity. So you can compare these two pieces to see kind of what's going to work best for you. But if you're teaching this in an asynchronous type style, you are going to want to use something such as Flipgrid or some sort of like video capturing capability, whatever your district is promoting and allowing, in order for students to record their reflections to that article. And of course, we have our business plan, which is very similar to the business plan that we found in the unmodified version of the activity. I was very intentional pointing out the points of the interactive engineering design notebook that the students should be responding to. So this section deals specifically with the improve portion of that notebook. And at that point, we are done with that food truck unit. So once we have all of these pieces together, you kind of get back into the unmodified version where you have students sharing their sharing their food truck projects, and figuring out a way for students to best showcase those. If students are presenting all at the same time, that's going to be pretty difficult and time consuming. If students, it's also one of those things where do you allow screen sharing access to kids at home and things like that. It may be easier if your district has invested in anything that can do breakout rooms. So for example, Zoom, it could be something that is conducted in breakout rooms, so that way you have multiple presentations going on at the same time. If you're a school that you really prefer to do this project with actual vendor feedback, like in not just you, but like community members that are giving students feedback, then you can leverage multiple video calls or breakout rooms to achieve that presentation component. So again, the big shifts there, the use of the virtual engineering design notebook in all three of the modified components. And then for students who are remote, the food truck guidance that's been provided here has been retooled to be more independent driven rather than team based. All right, Ted. I think that serves about as general of an overview as I can provide to the new materials.
Thank you so much, Spencer. Trying to get back to the sharing option. Okay. Once again, you know, uh, like this unit was redesigned. Just keep all of the objectives in mind that the original course laid out. I will share it for those of you that may be new to Quest for Success for this year. Uh, is like like the original course, I should say that the pilot course was redesigned because Unit 3 and Unit 4, like it was a lot. We know it was a lot. Uh, but as many of you heard in your trainings, we deliberately redesigned Quest for Success to add that rigor that we expect from all Louisiana students. And so, I just encourage you to the best of your ability to continue to try to offer, like offer the course with fidelity, and try to hit on all these learning objectives uh, that we built into the course. uh, so we're right at the end of our presentation. Excuse me. We're right at the end of our presentation. As always, all of the activities, all of the materials for Quest for Success, including any of the original materials, any of the new alternative materials, are going to be located on the Quest for Success website. The video also will be on that website underneath the file box for each unit. So if you're familiar with our website, all of the units are separated into file boxes by unit, so unit 1 through 8. And we're going to place a link for the video under that particular file box. So this video will be under unit 3. And also, we encourage teachers to go to our Slack channel, to join the Slack channel, just so you can communicate with teachers across the state. We understand that some of you may be the only teacher in your parish teaching Quest for Success. And so, we don't want you to plan in a bubble, plan along. A lot of teachers have created additional resources, whether it was quizzes, whether it was some type of exit or entry ticket. So your peers have created things that they're often sharing, as well as ideas on how to be able to offer this if your school system doesn't allow Zoom or some other thing. So I encourage y'all to become a part of that community. I built it intentionally to grow organically so you can have somebody to talk to and not being this alone. So definitely please join that. As always, if there are any questions, please reach out to me, tedrick.holmes@la.gov. I'll do my best to answer any questions that you may have. I'm going to check and see if we have any questions in chat also. Some of you may want to ask a question while we have Spencer on. I don't see any questions. Okay. Well, we're not getting any questions, so we'll go ahead and get ready to end this. Many of you have expressed appreciation and gratitude. So thank you as well for continuing to serve our students during this time. We know that sometimes during this time things are challenging. Thanks, Spencer, for taking the time, out to come and help us, with this. So those of you that may say, name Spencer Kuiper sounds familiar. Yes, he was Teacher of the Year for Louisiana. I know he doesn't like to discuss it, but yes, so we went and got high caliber talent in order to help create these additional resources. So with that, we're going to end the webinar. It should be posted probably sometime tomorrow, as well as the resources are already linked in that hybrid Quest for Success guide. So please feel free to go ahead and download it and access it. With that said, we're going to end for tonight. Thank you so much. Please feel free, like I said, always feel free to reach out to me. I'm pretty quick about responding. So anything you need, definitely reach out to me and I do my best to help you out or get an answer if I don't have the answer. Please have a great evening and stay safe. Thank you so much. We'll see you again soon.